Snow moved through the forest on all fours, her white hair tangled with leaves and dirt, her bare feet silent on frost-covered ground. She tracked the scent of deer with the same precision as the 40 wolves running beside her. She was hunting. She was pack. She was home. The human world she'd been born into 10 years ago was barely a memory now, just fragments of pain and abandonment that surfaced sometimes in dreams. The massive white wolf led the pack, his body twice the size of any normal wolf. Snow followed close behind him, as she'd done since she was 8 years old, and he'd found her dying in these woods. He'd carried her to the den in his jaws that first night, gentle despite his size. Snow had no words anymore. She communicated in growls, whines, body language. She hunted with teeth and nails. She slept in a den beneath an ancient oak, safe against warm fur. This was life. This was enough. The white wolf's howl signaled the pack to spread out. Snow moved left, low to the ground, tracking movement. There, a young buck, strong but inexperienced. The pack closed in with practiced coordination. Snow's role was to drive prey toward the stronger wolves. She burst from cover with a sound more animal than human, startling the deer directly into the white wolf's path. The kill was quick. The pack fed by hierarchy, the white wolf first, then other strong males, then females, finally Snow. She'd stopped being disgusted by raw meat years ago. It was food. It kept her alive. Afterward, the pack rested in a clearing. Snow lay against the white wolf's side, fingers buried in his thick fur, listening to his heartbeat. Warm, solid, safe. He was the only constant she'd known since that terrible night when her father had left her in the forest to die. If Snow had still known human thoughts, she might have wondered why this wolf was so much larger than the others, why he seemed to understand her in ways that went beyond normal animal intelligence, why he sometimes looked at her with eyes that held too much awareness. But she'd forgotten how to wonder about such things. The sound of human voices shattered the peace. Snow's head snapped up, body tensing. The white wolf was on his feet instantly, warning growl rumbling deep. The pack scattered into defensive positions surrounding Snow. 5 men pushed through the trees. They wore strange clothes and carried metal cages on wheels, ropes with loops, tools for capturing. "There she is!" one shouted. "The feral girl from the stories!" Snow understood tone, if not words. They'd come for her, wanted to take her. She bared her teeth and snarled, dropping into a crouch. The white wolf positioned himself between Snow and the men, his massive body a living shield. 40 wolves created an impenetrable wall. Those are real wolves. They'll attack. We have tranquilizer darts. The girl is worth the risk. Scholars in the capital will pay a fortune to study a human raised by wolves. Terror flooded through Snow. They wanted to cage her, take her from her pack. She'd been abandoned once. She would not be taken. Something inside her broke open. Power she'd never known existed erupted outward. Her voice, unused for years, except for animal sounds, formed a single word that bypassed speech entirely. Help! It wasn't human language. It was older, primal, a call that went straight to the heart of every wolf within miles. The forest exploded with movement. Wolves poured from every direction. Not just Snow's pack, but wolves from neighboring territories, from distant dens, from hunting grounds miles away. Within minutes, over 100 wolves surrounded the clearing, all focused on the 5 men. The men's faces went white. "This isn't natural! Run!" They scattered, abandoning their equipment in panic. The wolves pursued them to the forest's edge, ensuring the threat was gone. When the forest was safe again, Snow collapsed. Using that power had drained something essential from her. She was weak, shaking, barely conscious. The white wolf was at her side immediately, supporting her weight with his body. Snow pressed her face into his fur, overwhelmed by what she'd done. And then the white wolf did something impossible. His body beneath her hands began to change. Fur became skin. The form shifted, bones restructuring. Snow scrambled backward in shock, watching as the wolf became a man. A man who was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with silver-white hair that fell past his shoulders. Ice-blue eyes that were somehow familiar, despite the unfamiliar face. Powerfully built, scarred from battles, completely comfortable with the transformation. "Snow," he said, and his voice was deep and gentle, and somehow right. "Those men were going to take you. I couldn't protect you properly as a wolf, not against human weapons." Snow stared at him, mind struggling to process. The white wolf was human. Had always been human. She made a sound between a snarl and a sob and tried to run, but her legs were weak and she barely made it 3 steps before collapsing. He caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy. You're safe. I promise." Snow fought against his hold, all animal panic and betrayed rage. "I'm Fenrir," he said quietly, not loosening his grip but not hurting her. "I've been protecting you for 10 years. That hasn't changed." Snow thrashed harder, making sounds of distress. "Liar, betrayer, not pack, not safe." "I couldn't reveal myself before. It's forbidden by ancient law. But those men forced my hand. I won't let anyone take you." Over Fenrir's shoulder, Snow saw the rest of the pack watching. They didn't seem surprised by his transformation. They'd known. They'd all known, except her. The betrayal was complete. Snow went limp in Fenrir's arms, not from acceptance, but from exhaustion and shock. Her eyes closed, and darkness claimed her. When Snow woke, she was moving. Strong arms carried her, and the scent was familiar, despite everything. The white wolf's scent, even in human form. She kept her eyes closed, listening. Multiple footsteps, not wolves now, but humans walking upright. "How is she?" A woman's voice, concerned. Unconscious, but stable. That was Fenrir. Her gift manifested powerfully. She called every wolf within 5 miles. "Wild speaker," the woman said. "I've only read about them in ancient texts. They're supposed to be myth." "She's real, and she's my mate." Silence then. "Your Majesty, she's feral. She can barely speak. She's been living as a wolf for 10 years. How can you possibly—" "She's my mate," Fenrir repeated, harder this time. "The moon goddess chose her for me. I felt the bond 2 months ago when she turned 18. I've been waiting for the right moment to reveal myself." Winter. The name triggered a faint memory in Snow's mind. Female, beta, strong. What will you do with her? Teach her. Help her remember what it means to be human. Give her a choice. Fenrir's arms tightened slightly around Snow. She deserves to know both worlds before she decides which one she wants. Snow's eyes opened. She found herself looking directly into Fenrir's ice-blue gaze. "You're awake. Good. We're almost there." Snow looked around. They were walking through a different forest, and there were humans with them, 25 or more, all moving in coordinated formation. Warriors. She struggled, wanting down, wanting to run. "If I put you down, will you try to run?" Fenrir asked. Snow bared her teeth at him. "That's what I thought. Snow, listen to me. You can't go back to the wild right now. Those hunters know where you are. They'll come back with more men, more weapons. You're not safe there anymore." Snow didn't want to understand his words, but somehow she did. The meaning came through, even if the specific words were fuzzy. "I'm taking you to my territory. You'll be safe there, protected. And when the danger has passed, if you still want to return to the forest, I'll take you back myself. I promise." They emerged from the forest into something Snow had vague memories of. A settlement. Buildings made of wood and stone, paths of packed dirt, and wolves. So many wolves. but these ones wore clothes and walked upright and looked at her with curious eyes. Snow tried to make herself smaller in Fenrir's arms. Too many, too much, too wrong. "She's terrified," Winter said quietly. "I know. We'll take her somewhere quiet." They entered a large building and moved through corridors. Finally, a door opened into a room that was warm and quiet, with a fire burning and furs spread on the floor. Fenrir set Snow down carefully on the furs. She immediately crawled to the corner farthest from the door, making herself as small as possible. "I'll leave you to examine her, Sage," Fenrir said, "but I'll be right outside if she needs me." The old woman, Sage, approached slowly and carefully. "Hello, little one. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to make sure you're healthy." Snow watched her with wary eyes, ready to fight or flee. Sage sat down several feet away, making no move to touch. "You've been living with wolves for a long time, haven't you? You've forgotten how to be around people. That's all right. We can go slowly." She reached into a bag and pulled out dried meat, tossing a piece toward Snow, who caught it automatically and ate it in one bite. "Good. You must be hungry. The king said you used a great deal of power today. That takes energy." Over the next hour, Sage earned Snow's cautious trust through food and patience. When she tried to come closer to check Snow's scars, Snow snarled a warning. "All right, no touching yet. I understand." She left food and water within reach and departed. When Snow was alone, she curled up in the corner, wrapping her arms around her knees, and made a sound of distress that was purely animal. The door opened. Fenrir entered, still in human form. Snow's first instinct was to snarl at him, but he sat down across the room, making no move to approach. "I know you don't trust me right now. I know you feel betrayed, but I want you to understand something. I couldn't reveal myself in the wild. It's forbidden by law, older than either of us. Kings of my bloodline spend part of every year living as true wolves to never forget our animal nature. During that time, we cannot shift, cannot break character, cannot be anything but wolf." Snow didn't want to listen, but his voice was the white wolf's voice, and that part of her that had trusted him for 10 years couldn't help but respond. "I found you when you were 8 years old. Someone had left you to die. You were crying, terrified, alone. I should have taken you to the nearest pack, but something stopped me. So I carried you to the den instead, and you became pack." Snow's eyes burned with tears she'd forgotten how to cry. "I watched you grow up, watched you forget human words and learn wolf language, watched you become fierce and strong and wild. And 2 months ago, on your 18th birthday, I felt the mate bond snap into place." Mate. That was a concept Snow understood, even in her feral state. Pairs that bonded, wolves that chose each other. But she'd thought the white wolf was her mate, her partner, her chosen one. And he was. He was the same being, just in a different form. Snow's mind hurt trying to reconcile these truths. You don't have to decide anything right now. You don't have to accept the bond, or accept me, or accept any of this. But please, let me keep you safe. Let me teach you what you've forgotten. And when you're ready, truly ready, you can choose what you want. Wild or civilized, wolf or human, with me or without me. The choice will be yours." He stood slowly. "I'll have food brought 3 times a day. Sage will check on you, and if you need me for anything, just call. I'll hear you." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Snow was alone, with her confusion, her fear, and the strange ache in her chest that told her the mate bond was real. The first days were hard. Snow refused to wear clothes, refused to sleep in the bed, refused to speak. She stayed in wolf form whenever possible, shifting back only when exhaustion forced her human body to rest. Sage visited regularly, always bringing food, always patient. She never forced interaction, never pushed boundaries. Fenrir came every evening and sat across the room, talking about his day, about the pack, about nothing important. He never approached, never demanded response, just was there. On the 5th day, Snow shifted to human form and didn't shift back. She sat in the corner, wrapped in furs, watching Fenrir with wary eyes. "You stayed human," he observed. "That's progress." Snow made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "Are you trying to talk? It's all right if you can't remember the words. They'll come back with time." "Why?" Snow managed, her voice rough from disuse. "Why lie?" It was barely intelligible, but Fenrir understood. "I didn't lie. I couldn't tell you the truth. There's a difference." Snow glared at him. "I know it doesn't feel different to you, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. I'm sorry I couldn't prepare you, but I'm not sorry I protected you all those years. And I'm not sorry the moon goddess chose you as my mate." "Don't want mate," Snow forced out. "That's your choice. But the bond exists whether you want it or not. You can reject it, reject me, and I'll honor that. But you'll always feel the pull. And so will I." Over the following weeks, Snow's human side slowly emerged from beneath years of feral living. Words came back in fragments. Sage would hold up an object and say its name, and Snow would repeat the sound, but the concept remained fuzzy. "Spoon," Sage said patiently. "Spoon," Snow echoed. But when Sage tried to get her to use it, Snow just dipped her fingers directly into the bowl. It made sense to her. Fingers worked. The spoon was unnecessary. Clothes were another battle. Snow tolerated a simple tunic because the settlement was cold, but anything more made her feel trapped. Boots were impossible. She'd rip them off within minutes. "She needs to move freely," Winter observed. "She's been running on 4 legs for 10 years. Tight clothing feels like being caged." So they compromised. Loose tunics and pants. No shoes unless absolutely necessary. Hair left wild and unbound. The hardest part was learning to sleep inside. The room felt wrong. Too enclosed, too separated from her pack. The 3rd night, Fenrir heard her distress through the mate bond and came to find her curled in a corner, shaking and making small sounds of fear. He didn't ask permission. He simply shifted to wolf form and lay down beside her, his massive body curving around hers protectively. Snow immediately pressed against him, burying her face in his fur, and finally slept. After that, Fenrir spent every night with her. Sometimes as a wolf, sometimes as a man, but always there. Winter became an unexpected ally. The fierce beta woman treated Snow neither as a pet nor as a child, but as an equal who simply needed information. "You're not less than us because you lived wild," Winter said one day. "You're different. You survived something most of us couldn't. That takes strength." "Miss Pack," Snow said, the words still coming slowly. "Miss Den. Miss Hunting." "Then hunt," Winter said simply. "Shift and run in the forest. No one's stopping you." Fenrir said danger. Hunters. "The hunters have been dealt with. They won't bother you again. You're free to go into the forest whenever you want. You're not a prisoner, Snow." That changed things. Snow began spending her days in the forest, shifting to wolf form and running for hours. She'd hunt, eat, rest under trees, and only return when the sun set. Slowly, she found a rhythm that worked for her, but she was still struggling with her gift, the wild speaker ability. Sometimes she'd call wolves accidentally when feeling strong emotions. Other times she'd try deliberately and nothing would happen. "Your gift is tied to your emotions right now," Sage said. "You need to learn conscious control." They began training sessions in a clearing far from the settlement. Sage would have Snow practice calling specific wolves, not with desperation, but with intention. Think about what you want. Not just help, but specific help. Call the scout wolves when you want information. Call the hunters when you want to track prey. It took weeks of practice, but slowly Snow learned to modulate her calls. She discovered she could send not just a summons, but complex messages. "This is extraordinary," Sage said one afternoon. "Wild speakers were legendary. Most could only call wolves. You can command them, organize them, communicate complex strategies." "Feels normal," Snow said, shrugging. "Like talking. Because to you, it is talking. You spent 10 years communicating this way. It's more natural to you than human speech." The breakthrough with human language came unexpectedly. Snow was watching warriors spar when one fell badly and didn't get up. Without thinking, Snow ran to him. "Hurt," she said, placing her hands on his leg. "Broken here." She pointed to exactly where the bone had fractured. Winter stared at her. "How did you know?" "Can feel. Body tells me. Wrong there." They carried him to Sage, who confirmed Snow was right. More importantly, Snow had used several complete sentences without realizing it. "The words come back faster when you're not thinking about them," Sage observed. "When you're focused on something else, your brain remembers." From then on, they used that approach. Instead of formal lessons, they'd engage Snow in activities that required communication. Snow's vocabulary expanded rapidly. Her grammar was still simple, direct, but it was functional. "Not stupid," she told Winter one day when someone had suggested simplifying an explanation. "Just forgot words, not forgot thinking." "I know," Winter said. "Anyone who thinks you're simple is an idiot." 3 months after arriving at Frostwool, Snow had her first real test of belonging. A delegation arrived from a neighboring territory. Among them was her father. Demon looked older than Snow remembered, his hair gray now, his face lined with years. He was there for political negotiations, having risen to become alpha of his own small pack. He didn't recognize the wild young woman standing beside Fenrir at first, but when Fenrir introduced her as Luna Snow, his mate, Demon's face went white. "Snow?" His voice cracked. That's impossible." "Snow died. We left her in the forest 10 years ago. There's no way she could have survived." The room went very quiet. Every wolf present turned to look at Demon with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Snow stared at the man who'd once been her father. She remembered him now. Remembered his face as he'd set her down in the forest and walked away. Remembered calling after him, begging him not to leave her. "You left me," she said, her voice flat and cold. "To die. 8 years old. Left." Demon's face crumpled. "We had no choice. The pack, they wouldn't accept an Omega. My mate, your stepmother, she insisted. I had to choose between you and my position. I chose survival." "You chose wrong." Fenrir's voice was ice. "You abandoned a child to die alone in the forest. A child who was pack, was family, who deserved protection." "She survived," Demon said desperately. "Obviously she survived. She's here, so it all worked out." "No thanks to you," Winter cut in, her voice hard. "She survived because wolves showed her more mercy than you did. Wild animals were better parents than you were." Snow took a step forward. She was smaller than her father, but she held herself with a confidence he'd never seen in the frightened child she'd been. "Survived," she agreed. "Learned, grew strong, found real pack, real family." She looked at Fenrir, at Winter, at the wolves of Frostwool who'd accepted her without question. "They chose me. You threw me away. Not same. Snow, please." Demon reached out as if to touch her. "I'm sorry. I've regretted it every day. If I could take it back." "Can't," Snow said simply. "Done. Over. You not pack. Not family. Nothing." She turned away from him. The ultimate dismissal in wolf culture. He no longer existed to her. "The negotiations are over, Alpha Demon," Fenrir said. "You and your delegation will leave my territory immediately, and you will spread word that Luna Snow is under my protection. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or even speaks ill of her will answer to me personally." Demon nodded stiffly and left, When they were gone, Snow sagged slightly against Fenrir. Thought would feel different seeing him, but just empty. He stopped being your family the day he left you, Fenrir said gently. You know that, right? Real family doesn't abandon pack. No, Snow agreed. You real family. Pack home. Winter approached, putting a hand on Snow's shoulder. I'm proud of you. That took strength. Not hard, Snow said. He weak. Chose fear over cub. Wolves never do that. Even wild wolves protect cubs. It was true. In 10 years of living with wolves, Snow had never seen a pack abandon their young. After that encounter, Snow stopped fighting her human side quite so hard. She realized that being human didn't mean being weak. Fenrir was human and strong. Winter was human and fierce. Sage was human and wise. Being human just meant having choices. And Snow was learning she liked having choices. She started wearing dresses occasionally, though they were always practical ones she could move in. She learned to braid her hair, though she still preferred it wild. She even mastered the spoon, though she still sometimes ate with her hands when no one was watching. More importantly, she started engaging with the pack beyond just Fenrir, Winter, and Sage. She'd sit in on council meetings, offering insights that surprised everyone. She'd help train younger wolves in tracking and hunting. She'd work in the healing center, using her intuitive understanding of injuries. People stopped seeing her as the feral girl. They started seeing her as Luna, as Fenrir's mate, as a valuable member of the pack. But Snow never fully left the wild behind. She still spent hours every day in the forest, still hunted in wolf form, still slept better under stars than in rooms, and Fenrir never asked her to change that. Instead, he joined her, spending his nights as a wolf beside her more often than not. You don't have to do this, Snow told him one night as they lay beneath an ancient oak. You king should sleep in hall, in bed. I'm also wolf, Fenrir said, and I'm happiest here with you. The hall and the bed can wait. That was when Snow truly understood what the mate bond meant. It wasn't about one person changing to fit the other. It was about two people meeting in the middle, each bringing their own truth to create something new together. And slowly, despite her resistance, she found herself drawn to Fenrir in ways that went beyond the bond. 3 months after the hunters had come, Snow found herself in Fenrir's rooms late one evening. He was standing by a window, looking out at the moon. Can't sleep? He asked without turning. No, you too much thinking. He glanced at her. Come here. I want to show you something. Snow approached cautiously. Fenrir pointed out the window at the forest beyond. See that part of the woods? That's where I found you 10 years ago tonight. Snow looked at the trees, trying to remember that night. She'd been so small, so scared, so certain she was going to die. You were crying, Fenrir said softly, calling for your father. But he didn't come. So I did. Why? Snow asked. Why save me? I don't know. Instinct maybe, or fate. But I'm glad I did. Snow turned to look at him properly. In the moonlight he looked less like a king, and more like the white wolf she'd trusted for so long. The same eyes, the same quiet strength. I'm sorry, she said haltingly, for being angry. You saved me, protected me. I forgot that. You had every right to be angry. I kept a huge truth from you. Even if I had no choice, that doesn't erase the hurt. Snow took a step closer, then another, until she was close enough to touch. Slowly, carefully, she placed her hand on his chest over his heart. The same spot where she'd rested her head against his wolf form hundreds of times. The same heartbeat. The same warmth. The same safety. Still you, she whispered. Wolf or man, still you. Fenrir's hand came up to cover hers. Always. I'll always be both, wild and civilized, wolf and man. And if you'll have me, I'll always be yours. Snow looked up at him, at the face she'd learned to trust over these past months. The mate bond hummed between them. No longer something to fight, but something to accept. "Mate," she said simply. "Mine." Fenrir's smile was like sunrise. "Yours, if you'll be mine." "Yes." The word came clearly, with no hesitation. "Yes." When Fenrir kissed her, it felt like coming home, like the final piece of herself clicking into place. She was wild and civilized, wolf and human, and she was his. 6 years later, Snow stood at the edge of the forest, watching her 3 children play. Her daughter, Kira, 5 years old with her mother's white hair and her father's commanding presence, was teaching her 3-year-old brother, Ash, how to track. Baby Lyra, only 6 months old, was strapped to Snow's chest in a sling, sleeping peacefully. Snow had never fully returned to civilization. She still preferred to run as a wolf, still hunted in the forest, still slept better under stars than in the Great Hall. But she'd learned to balance both worlds, to be Luna when needed, and wild creature when possible. Fenrir emerged from the trees in wolf form, a fresh kill in his jaws. Even after 6 years, he still spent part of each year living wild, maintaining the tradition of his bloodline. Snow and the children often joined him, teaching Kira and Ash to honor both sides of their nature. Snow shifted to wolf form and greeted her mate with a gentle nuzzle. Lyra, used to her parents' shifting, continued to sleep peacefully. "Mama, Mama," Kira called. "I found tracks. Big ones." Snow shifted back to human form and knelt beside her daughter. "Show me." Kira proudly pointed to the wolf track. "I think it's Uncle Frost from the Northern Pack." "Good job," Snow praised. Her speech was fluid now, though she still preferred simple, direct words. "You're learning well." Fenrir shifted to human form. "Our daughter will be an excellent tracker." "She has your instincts," Snow added with a rare smile, "and your stubbornness." Later, when the children were playing under Winter's watchful eye, Fenrir pulled Snow aside. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing this life? Staying with me?" Snow looked at her mate, the white wolf who'd saved a dying child and become a king. "No," she said simply. "I have both worlds now. Wild and home, pack and family, wolf and human. You gave me choice. I chose you." Fenrir kissed her forehead. "And I'd choose you again. Every time. In every life. Years later, when young wolves would come to Luna Snow feeling torn between their animal and human natures, she'd take them to the forest and shift with them. She'd run beside them until they were exhausted, then sit with them in wolf form, communicating without words. Eventually, she'd shift back and speak in her direct, simple way. "You're not half of one thing or half of another. You're whole. Both wolf and human, both wild and civilized. The moon goddess didn't make you choose. She made you complete." She'd tell them about being abandoned, about living feral for 10 years, about forgetting speech and sleeping in dens and hunting on 4 legs, about being rescued by a white wolf who turned out to be a king, about learning to walk in both worlds without losing either. Some will tell you to pick one nature, to be civilized or be wild. But that's a false choice. You can be both. You should be both. That's what makes us shifters instead of just humans, or just animals. She gestured toward the forest, where her children were running as wolves. "My daughter is a princess and a hunter. My sons are princes and pack members. They don't have to choose. Neither do you. The moon goddess made us whole, wild hearts and human minds, animal instincts and civilized thoughts. Don't let anyone tell you to be less than all of what you are." And the young wolves would leave feeling lighter, understanding that being torn between 2 worlds wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was completeness. It was exactly what they were meant to be. Snow herself never stopped being both. She was Luna of Frostwool and pack member of the Wild Wolves. She spoke in council meetings and hunted in the forest. She wore furs at ceremonies and ran naked under the moon. She raised her children to honor both sides of their nature. And at night, when she curled against Fenrir's side, whether in human or wolf form, she was home. Completely, wholly, wildly home.